Writing advice is everywhere, but unfortunately, much of it is tailored for neurotypical brains. So it doesn't account for the unique ways that ADHD and autistic individuals process information, manage time, and harness creativity, which means it doesn't work for us. Following advice that doesn't align with how your brain works leads to frustration, burnout, and even a loss of passion for writing. No one wants that. And your book deserves better. In this video, I'll break down some of the worst advice commonly given to ADHD and autistic writers, explain why it doesn't work for neurodiverse minds, and explore alternative advice so you can thrive in your writing journey.
So who am I? I'm Delin Blake, a neurodivergent published author, book coach, and former ghostwriter of over 200 books. You can check me out at delinblake.com. And I'm going to share with you my experiences of the best ways to write books, even when you're ADHD and autistic like me and work a full-time job. Because the modern world makes it easier than ever for us to achieve our author dreams. And I have a free gift for you. Be sure to check it out in the description below. It's going to make writing go so much faster and easier and give you the clarity you need.
Here's the first bit of bad advice. You need to write every day. The advice to write every day is pervasive in writing circles, with the idea being that consistent daily writing will help you build a habit and eventually lead to a completed manuscript. While this might work for some, it's terrible advice for many neurodiverse writers like us. Forcing yourself to write daily, regardless of your mental or emotional state, quickly leads to burnout, anxiety, and a decline in the quality of your writing. So, what should you do instead? Simple. Write when you're at your best. Instead of adhering to a strict daily schedule, focus on writing when you're at your most productive and inspired. Pay attention to your natural energy rhythms. Some people write best in the morning, while others find their creative flow at night, while still others work best midday. And that's all fine. Rather than pushing yourself to write every day, align with your personal rhythm. This means writing more on days when you're in the zone and giving yourself permission to take breaks when you need them.
Have something you want me to cover in the future? Want to respond or have a question about something I said? Comment below.
When you allow yourself this flexibility, it not only makes writing more enjoyable, but also helps you maintain your creativity and avoid burnout. Now let's talk about our next piece of bad advice. And it's this. Stick to one project until it's finished. This piece of advice assumes that multitasking or working on multiple projects dilutes your focus and prevents you from finishing anything. However, for neurodiverse writers like us, working on a single project for an extended period leads to boredom, frustration, and a loss of motivation. Minds like ours thrive on variety and find it difficult to stick to one project without losing interest. That's why rather than forcing yourself to work on one project until it's complete, give yourself permission to switch between different projects. Working on multiple stories at the same time actually keeps your creativity flowing and prevents you from getting stuck. When you feel blocked or uninspired on one project, switching to another can give your mind a fresh challenge and help you stay engaged. This is why I, myself, have around 6 books going in various stages of completeness at any one time, and why I tend to favor rapid release because they all get done around the same time too. Now let's talk about even more bad advice. Write in silence, otherwise known as eliminate all distractions. The idea that writing requires complete silence is based on the assumption that distractions are always detrimental to focus. While this might be true for some, many ADHD and autistic writers find that silence is more distracting than helpful, and there's a reason for that. Without some form of background noise or stimulation, it's easy for your mind to wander, which makes it difficult to stay focused on the task at hand. You know that old urban legend about the call coming from inside the house? Well, without the outside distractions, the distraction actually comes from inside our own minds. So it's pretty common to want some kind of external noise to drown out all that internal noise. Instead of forcing yourself to write in silence, experiment with different types of background noise to find what works best for you. It could be music, ambient sounds like rain, cafe chatter, or even white noise. There are even soundtracks specifically designed to enhance focus, such as binaural beats. Personally, I use my comfort movies and shows. I watch these shows so often I know them by heart, so they don't need much of my attention. And since I do know them so well, they act as a type of timekeeper.
I hope you're enjoying the video so far and that you've gotten some aha moments. If so, remember to like to see more content like this.
For example, when a certain scene is on, I know how close I am to the end of both the movie and the writing session. The key is to find a sound environment that helps you concentrate and feel comfortable. This turns the background noise into a tool that supports your writing, rather than some kind of distraction. Now let's talk about outlines, as in needing to outline your whole book before you start. Now, I'm a big fan of outlines. Always have been. I teach them to all my students. A detailed outline provides a roadmap that makes the writing process go a lot smoother, especially with a life, a full-time job, and a limited time to write. However, a strict outline often feels suffocating. If your creative process is more spontaneous, sticking to a rigid plan can drain the joy out of writing and leave you feeling trapped by your own structure. That doesn't mean you don't need an outline, but it does mean you don't have to follow it to the letter and let it stifle your creativity. If you don't want to be confined by an outline, that's perfectly fine. Use outlines as flexible guides rather than strict rules. Start with a rough outline that highlights major plot points or ideas, but give yourself permission to stray from it as new ideas emerge during the writing process. And then update your outline with the new information. Your outline isn't a straitjacket. It's a living document that evolves with your story. This approach allows you to maintain some structure while still leaving room for creative exploration and improvisation. Now let's talk about the just plain awful advice to finish what you start. There's a lot of pressure in writing circles to finish every project you start. The idea that finishing something gives you motivation to keep going. Only it's not. For brains like ours, which are intrinsically motivated, forcing yourself to complete a project that no longer inspires you leads to burnout and a loss of passion for writing. We don't get that same dopamine hit that neurotypicals do when we finish a project. Our subconscious doesn't even remember we did it. So that makes it hard to find joy in finishing anything. Instead of forcing yourself to finish a project that isn't working, give yourself permission to pivot or pause. If a story or idea isn't flowing, it's okay to set it aside and work on something else that excites you. You always have the option to return to the original project later, when your eyes are fresh and your energy is renewed. Knowing when to pause or pivot is an important skill. It enables you to focus on what's working and maintain your enthusiasm for writing, instead of getting stuck in a project that feels like a chore. Because once your writing turns into a chore, you're guaranteed to never finish that book. And speaking of forcing yourself to do something, let's go right into the next piece of rotten advice: eat that frog.
I hope you're enjoying the video so far and that you've gotten some aha moments. If so, remember to like to see more content like this.
The eat that frog method was made popular by productivity expert Brian Tracy. It says that tackling your hardest or most dreaded task first thing in the day makes the rest of the day easier. Only for us, it doesn't. In fact, it's counterproductive for ADHDers and other neurodiverse writers. Facing the most difficult task right off the bat is overwhelming and paralyzing. This makes it harder to get started at all. This leads to avoidance, stress, and a sense of failure before you've even begun. So instead of forcing yourself to dive into the most difficult task, start with something that feels achievable. This can be a task that excites you, one that feels easy, or even a warm-up writing session. The key is to build momentum by completing something manageable first. This creates a sense of relief that helps you tackle the harder stuff later. Notice I said relief, not accomplishment. This is because it's very hard for us to feel accomplished. And if you don't feel it, even after you do the thing, that's fine. Feeling that relief is often enough to keep going. By easing into the day, you're working with your brain's natural tendencies rather than against them. Now, let's talk about more bad advice, having to write in a linear fashion. Start to finish. This is another piece of bad advice often given to writers. This approach assumes that once you begin, you'll move sequentially through the plot until you reach the end. However, if you think more creatively and non-linearly, this is frustrating and a limited way to approach writing. Rather than forcing yourself to write your story in a linear fashion, embrace the freedom to write out of order. I do it all the time. This is where the outline comes in. If you're excited about a particular scene, chapter, or piece of dialogue, start there, even if it comes later in the story. This allows you to maintain your enthusiasm and creativity, which is crucial for keeping your motivation high. Once you have various parts of your story written, you can use tools like AI or even simple index cards to piece everything together into a coherent narrative. You can even use AI to make the parts flow into each other, and then rewrite them to match your voice. This method lets you focus on the most exciting parts of your story when you're feeling inspired, rather than getting bogged down in sections that might be difficult to write. Writing non-linearly also helps you see connections between different parts of your story that might not be apparent when writing in a strict sequence.
By the way, I have a free gift for you that's going to supercharge your writing and give you the clarity you need to move forward on your book. You can get it in the description of the video below.
By allowing yourself to work on whatever part of the story you're most passionate about, you'll discover your overall narrative is richer, more dynamic, and more reflective of your unique creative process. Now let's talk about consistency. I know you've heard this one before. The idea of building a consistent writing habit is often hailed as the key to success. The advice says that if you just write at the same time every day, eventually it will become automatic. But for ADHDers, sticking to a strict routine is pretty much impossible. Life's unpredictability, fluctuating energy levels, and varying focus make it hard to maintain a rigid habit, leading to feelings of failure when you inevitably can't keep up. Also, we've been lied to about what a habit is. A habit is not just a repeated action, it's an action you do without thinking. And brains like ours get very few of those. For example, I've been brushing my teeth since early childhood, and while it is repeated action, it's not a true habit. I have to think about and remember to do it every single day. So what do? Instead of trying to force a rigid habit, focus on embracing your natural rhythms. Recognize that your energy, focus, and creativity ebbs and flows throughout the day or week. Allow yourself to write when you're naturally in a creative mood or have the mental bandwidth. This might mean writing in bursts of hyper-focus on some days and taking breaks on others. You can also aim for a flexible writing routine. This way you have a loose structure, but no guilt if you don't do it every day. For example, you might write for a couple of hours over the course of the week, rather than commit to writing at 9 a.m. every morning. This approach reduces pressure and allows you to tap into your writing energy when it's at its peak, without feeling chained to a habit that doesn't align with your brain's needs. Now, let's look at some advice that sounds good for us and that we often get excited about, but still doesn't work. Using a detailed planner to organize your writing time. We all love planners. They're so pretty, and they smell so good. And a lot of advice says that using a planner or calendar meticulously helps keep your writing on track. And while this method might work well for neurotypical people, for ADHDers, it quickly leads to frustration. Detailed planners become overwhelming, and once you fall behind, the guilt of not sticking to the plan snowballs into avoidance, anxiety, and burnout. This rigid structure doesn't account for fluctuating energy levels, interest, or motivation, which are common challenges for brains like ours. Instead of relying on a rigid planner, try using a more adaptable system. One approach is to block out general time windows for writing rather than scheduling specific tasks down to the hour. This could look like reserving a writing afternoon where you work on whatever project interests you most at that moment, rather than setting a strict task like finish Chapter 3. Additionally, try breaking tasks into smaller, manageable steps. You can use visual aids like sticky notes or a whiteboard to outline your progress, making it easy to shuffle things around without the stress of a missed deadline glaring back at you. Tools like Google Keep or Trello can help with keeping track of multiple projects in a non-overwhelming way, offering flexibility to move things around as needed. This method not only reduces stress, but keeps your writing practice aligned with your unique rhythm and prevents the sense of failure that rigid schedules often bring. And now, let's talk about my least favorite piece of advice. Just do it. One of the most common pieces of advice thrown at writers is to simply stop procrastinating and push through the resistance to write. While this might sound like good advice on the surface, for someone with ADHD, procrastination isn't about laziness or lack of willpower. It's often tied to difficulty with task initiation, time blindness, or even emotional overwhelm. Being told to just do it ignores the complex reasons behind why starting a task can feel impossible. Instead of trying to force yourself to just get it done, focus on creating what's called activation energy. This is the small initial push that can help you get started. This could be something as simple as opening your document, writing a sentence, or even outlining a single idea. You're not committing to finishing the task in one go. You're just starting it, and that feels a lot more manageable. This is twice as effective if you pair this with body doubling, where you work alongside someone else, either in person or virtually. This creates a low-pressure sense of accountability. Now, full disclosure, body doubling doesn't work for me, but I know many neurodiverse people it does work for, so I wanted to mention it. But breaking tasks into tiny steps always works. This helps reduce the emotional weight of the big task. When you focus on small victories, you'll find that momentum builds on its own, which makes it easier to continue writing. This way, you're working with your brain rather than trying to force it into submission. Now, have you ever heard this piece of advice? Use writing sprints or timers to boost productivity. Writing sprints and timers, like the popular Pomodoro technique, are often recommended to help boost productivity. And while this works for some, it often backfires for us. The ticking clock creates anxiety rather than focus, making it hard to engage in the flow state. And if you're not in the right mental space to write when that timer starts, it can feel like an additional source of pressure and frustration. Instead of relying on strict timers, focus on time awareness. This means paying attention to how long tasks actually take, without the rigid constraints of a timer. You can do this by tracking the time you naturally spend on tasks without the pressure of a countdown. In fact, you could use a stopwatch app instead of a timer. A stopwatch app counts up instead of down, so you know exactly how long something takes. This way, you learn more about your own rhythms without feeling rushed. Another approach is task-based pacing instead of time-based. This one is my favorite. Set a goal like write one scene or finish this paragraph, and allow yourself the freedom to take as much or as little time as needed. This shifts the focus from time pressure to task completion, which makes the process feel more organic. Plus, if you're on a roll, you can keep going without the disruption of a timer going off mid-flow. Remember, writing advice isn't one size fits all. What works for some might not work for you, and that's perfectly okay. By finding strategies that align with your unique way of thinking, you can create a writing process that's both effective and enjoyable.
Until next time, this is Delin Blake saying write on and claim your free gift at the link below.